Hi, today I want to walk you through all the basics of rendering lists and, having those based on data coming from your database and then using actions on specific list items. Let's say we click on the delete button on the third item and then we take the specific ID for this third item and we're going to make an API call to the backend and only delete this record, which is pretty cool. So we're doing advanced functionalities with lists today, and we're going to go through it, and it will be super easy and super easy to understand, great for intermediates and even beginners. So let's get started right now. Just to make this video not go 1 hour, I have already pre-built the Webflow design, but it is pretty simple. I just have the holder, which will hold all the items. I have the item in here that will be the list item. I have the text for the list item and a button that will, trigger the certain action to delete a specific list item. So the first step is we need to add Wized attributes. Now, the item component will be the ones where we want to render it multiple times because we want this to be like the template item for our list. So I'm going to go to the settings section here and I see this custom attribute section. I'm going to click on plus and I'm going to type Wized. And also, if you don't want to advertise Wized all across your site code, just type WEL, so then nobody will know that you're using Wized, at least not the ones that don't know of Wized, which is sometimes cool because, if it's built in Wized, your competitor may get the idea that they can rebuild the exciting thing that you did. And I have to say, for everything I built myself, I use WEL because it makes it harder to figure out that I'm using Wized as a little shortcut to make it easier. And when I export my code, I have nothing to do with Wized anyway, so I like to use WEL, but best practices is still Wized, just as a little side note. So I want to call this Wized list item. So let's do list, and then I do item. So you can name it however you want. You can also do list minus item. That works also now in embed 2 only. So we have list item. So because I need to add a Wized attribute so this list item can get recognized. So actually let's do this step by step, and we have that in here. Now, as you can see, if I were to go back to Wized, refresh my attributes, we see that this list item is recognized because I have added the Wized attribute. Now I can also have this be WEL, and if I publish this again, as you can see, and I reload, it will still be recognized as a list item. So I can also use WEL, just so that you know. So let's go to the heading. Let's click on plus for the custom attribute, and let's add WEL as well, and let's call this list item text, list item text. I'm going to publish this. And now, if I reload, we see the list item text has been recognized as well. This is how we add our elements in Wized. Now, the last thing that we need is the delete button. Let's add WEL. Oops, WEL. I like it because it's shorter to type. And then let's just call this delete item. Perfect. Let's publish this. Publish the selected domains. And now if I reload, we see this has been picked up too. Now, sometimes if you do longer attributes, this is a pain, really, like working with the Wized configurator, because it like overlays on your elements. Especially if you have more complex builds, it's really a pain how they build it with the X-ray mode. It's like that. Sometimes you have like this attribute text over this attribute text over this attribute text, and you don't know where to click. You want to click here and it opens this. So just be aware that X-ray mode for full working is very immature as of right now. So I like to go actually into the actions and just find them manually in here. But this is it so far. So now all the elements that we need to add functionality to, or we need to add certain event listeners to, meaning like when something happens, a click, a hover, we can do something, they have been added, and they get recognizable using the X-ray mode in Wized. Now, what we want to do is we want to render the list from something. So this is where we go to the backend now. We want to build a simple database. So let's go on database. Let's go to add table, enter data manually. Let's call this test render list video. Let's do UUID. That is a more secure way of doing that. And let's create a new API group. You can just do that here. I call it, you know, the same as I call this one. And let's also add basic CRUD endpoints. I'm not a fan of the pre-built Xano endpoints, but they are very handy for this example. So let's just go to the database here and let's give it a plus. We only need a text field, so I'm clicking on text, and let's call this task, just like that. And, you know, let's add some data to our database manually. So let's do cancel Wized, for example, and then activate Wized, and then let's do buy Wized merch, and then check Wized Discord. Okay, so we have some tasks, we have some things that, you know, starts to populate our data that we want to reflect on the front end. So if I duplicate now this tab, I'll just do this because in Xano we're working across multiple sections. I want to go to the API section here, right here. And now let's go Command F. Let's put this in here, and there we go. So now we have our CRUD endpoints. We have get. This will query all test render list video icon video records. So if I go on run and debug and run this, you see I will get all of them, which is great. So first of all, I want to copy the base URL. All those endpoints here are in a folder. This folder is called test render list video. So I want to copy the URL, the endpoint URL for this folder that is assigned to this specific API group, and add it as an app to my Wized project. Let's call this Xano list, for example. Just like that. And now I'm going to type in return, quotes, and I'll paste this URL in here. This is perfect. This is the URL only to our folder, right? If I were to open this URL on the internet, I would go to Swagger, which is an unprotected way to, you know, access my endpoints. I could just go to the get one in here and click on try it out, and then, you know, click on execute. Oh, this is not the get. I need to get all. That is this one. So I could go to this endpoint and try it out and click on execute. And, you know, I would get the data from my backend, which this is why you have to be very careful. If you use Wized, Wized is exposing all your endpoints in their source file. This is why you want to turn off Swagger, right? So let's actually do this together. What we want to do is we want to click on the three dots here, go on settings, and Swagger, we want to move this to disabled. You don't need that. If you're not building the next OpenAI, you won't need it. And now if the user tries to visit this link, it will say, sorry, we could not find what you're looking for, which is exactly what we want to return, because we don't want people to test our endpoints and get too easy access to them, which should be already protected. But then this is where we add later on authentication if needed. But this is, we don't have to worry about it. I just wanted to add this as a little side note in here. But what we want to do is now, since we have added that group, we want to go to the endpoint we want to work with. This is the one that will give us all the tasks or all the things to do. So I'm copying this path here for this endpoint. In Xano, you'll find it up here. And I will go back to Wized. I will create a request. Let's call this get all, for example. And let's go to the Xano app. And in the return section here, I'm adding quotes again. And I'm only adding the path, meaning in the app, I have the first part. And in the second part, and this is like the main URL basically for this API group. And then I have get all records and so on. This is how I get then the full endpoint. They have a modular way of, structuring the URLs. And let's go back to Xano. And this is a get endpoint, as we can see here. So let's change this to get. I don't need to pass on any parameters, and I can run this, and I'm getting the data now, as you can see in Wized. So once I got this data now, I want to render a list. So let's click on list item here. I can just simply go to X-ray mode, click on list item. It will automatically create an action for this list item. I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to go to render list. And then it says render list from array. Now, this is where the code comes in. I have to write return. And let's expand our request that we run right here. And I want to go to the item containing an array. Now let's zoom in a little bit. So we see there is this .data, and this starts like with the square bracket, and it ends with the square bracket. If it starts with the square bracket and ends with the square bracket, it's an array. So click on this array. Perfect. Let's zoom out. And then if I run this, we see we have the square bracket here, the square bracket here. This is a list. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. Let's go, and you don't need to do this, JSON prettify. Perfect. Let's go on here. Oops. Make this pretty. As you can see, we have a list. We have the square brackets right here, and we have this object. This is like a data type that contains this item, and then we have a comma, and we have an object containing, again, multiple data sets in it, and we have a comma, and we have this, this object in here containing multiple data in it, the comma, and so on. So this is a list in terms of JavaScript. So if I run this, I have this list. Now, if I reload, nothing is being rendered because I still have to add an iterator. So let's go to our variables, and let's call this variable iterator. We need to add an iterator, and you can call it whatever you want, that will start at 0, just like this. That will start at 0, and we need to reload. Otherwise, this variable is not getting updated. So now we have a 0. We need a variable that is just like an empty variable, basically, with just a 0 in it, so that then Wized can actually render the list. And now, as you can see, if I reload, there is no item anymore, because the list is being rendered based on the iterator, but there is no data. So the moment the data comes, we get the list rendered. And actually, you also want to affect the HTML. If you render lists, you want to do flex down, and then you can add your 0.75 rem gap in between those items, and this will be then considered by Wized, because Wized is manipulating it based on the HTML guidelines that you have set inside of Webflow, that if then the data gets rendered, we will have the certain spacing in between those, as you can see. But now we have those rendered, which is good. They all have static content still, and it doesn't have the dynamic content in it, but it's still getting rendered, which is a good sign. So this is great, and we have those rendered. But why do we need the v.iterator? We need the v.iterator if we want to render multiple items. We need to have the iterator variable, because this will help us. This needs to be assigned in order to render the list. This is how Wized works. But let's say you want to set the text for the third item. How does Wized know that this is the third item? So we need to have a variable which is like a data placeholder assigned to every list item. So this will be 0, this will be 1, this will be 2, this will be 3. And then we say the text for 3 is the text for 3, and so on. Let me actually show you what I mean by that. So if I go to list item here, and I go to set text, so I have created a new action, plain text, and I would just write return, and I would just add the iterator in here. By the way, it needs to be the same iterator that is assigned to the template list item when you render the list. This is v.iterator, and this needs to be v.iterator2. You will see that if I render the list, we will see 0, 1, 2, 3. This will give every item a unique ID so that we can make we can track it. We can understand this is the specific item. This is very important if we want to delete a specific item, because think of it like this. I click on item 2. Now I want to get the data from item 2 and then use it to delete it in the database. But in order to do that, I need to understand which item was clicked on. This is where the iterator is needed. So just so that you have the background. And we're going to use the iterator right now inside of brackets, as you can see here, to render a specific list. Now, this is not fully ready yet, so let's just copy this part here, and let's keep in mind that we copied the iterator. So now when we go in here in the data field, we have also like those little brackets that we just saw. We have 0. This is how Xano senses the data. They use the iterator system too. So we have 0, 0, 0, 0. This is all the data belonging to the first record, which starts at 0. And we have .task, which is cancel Wized, and then the 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. We also have task reactivate Wized. So we want to use the ones that are .task. But if I just set it as 0.task, all of them will say cancel Wized. So keep in mind our iterator. If I assign the iterator, which will actually let's go even one step back. If I do 1, all will say reactivate Wized. If I say 2 and run this, always say buy Wized merge, and so on. So we need this dynamic number. Let's actually add another experiment. If I were to add the iterator in here, just like after the text using a plus, we will see that it will say cancel Wized 0, cancel Wized 1, cancel Wized 2, cancel Wized 3. So I'm just going to take this dynamic number that will count up, and use it to get a specific record. So for the first one, it will have 0, and therefore it will get the task for cancel Wized. And for the second one, it will have 1, and therefore it will get the task for reactivate Wized. And for the third one, which is 2 here, it will get the one for buy Wized. So it will always apply this, right? And then we see cancel Wized, reactivate Wized, buy Wized, check Wized Discord. Why? Let's even keep in mind that, let's add a quote in here to have some space, add a plus and the iterator, right? This will add the number. So we have cancel Wized 0, reactivate Wized 1, buy Wized merge 2. It will use the iterator. This number here is the dynamic iterator that always counts for each cloned item up. And we use this counting up number here to get the specific task from the data that already has those numbers assigned to it to then get the specific item. Because if this would be 0, again, all would say cancel Wized. If this would be 1, all would say reactivate Wized. If this would be 2, all will say buy Wized merge. But if the first one is 0, the second one is 1, the third one is 2, and the fourth one is 3, using the dynamic counting up number that is assigned and it increments with each list item, I'm going to get the text cancel Wized for the first one, reactivate Wized for the second one, buy Wized merge for the third one, and check Wized Discord for the fourth one. This is how you render a list and how you maintain this dynamic level of content assigned to it. Now, this is all cool, but we can also do events assigned to it. So let's go on the delete item, and let's actually create a variable here that just says delete log. This is just like an example, delete log, just like that. Let's reload this. The delete log is empty. And again, I have to run the request in order to render the list, because the list is based on the data coming from the request. We're going to fix that later on, but let's just do another thing. So now when I click on X-ray and I click on delete from, and I can do on event, click, just like that, I'm just going to do an action for run function for now, or let's do a set variable for now. I'm going to do the delete log, and I'm just going to write return, and I'll take the ID, as you can see here, the .id, which is the number. I can use it in the database to delete it, the ID. And now I can use the iterator again, because the link will be performed on a cloned item. So if I add the iterator in here, where did it go? Here we go, the iterator. It will then, depending on which one of those iterations I click on, will lock the specific variable. So let's make sure the list is rendered. Let's look at the delete log now. v.delete log, if I click on cancel Wized, it will start with 4.4. If I click on reactivate Wized, it will start with 5.5. If I click on buy Wized merge, it will start with 0.9.2. And if I click on check Wized Discord, it will be D12. And if I click on Wized, cancel Wized again, it will say 4.4. And then reactivate Wized 5.5, right? So it will now, thanks to the iterator, get the dynamic value assigned to the specific item that was cloned using the way Wized manipulates the DOM using JavaScript. So once we now, track this specific value in here, we can then make an API call to delete it. And we don't even need to do that because Wized thinks for you in doing that. Now, the issue is the documentation is pretty bad, so you don't know that it thinks for you. But now here I am telling you that it thinks for you. So let's do this experiment and let's actually go to our delete record. So our delete record in Xano, which is part of the CRUD endpoint, is test render list item and then, the ID of the delete item. So let's copy this. Let's add another request. Here we go. Let's go to requests. Request. Here we go. And I'll be calling this, let's just do this, delete. Just like that. Let's call this delete. The app will be Xano list, and I'm going to write return, and I'll put this in quotes. So now this part will not work, so I have to remove this part. This will need to be replaced by the ID. So I have this part, and I'm going to add a plus. And now I'm going to make you stunned, right? Because Wized, and I cannot explain it because I don't know how it fully works because their documentation is pretty bad. But I found that it works, and I can show you that it works, and I can give you some of my explanation how I think it may work, even though I'm not sure if how I think it may work is actually how it works on the backend, how they build this thing, because they're not fully transparent in how everything works. But if I'm going to add now the ID in here for this variable that represents the ID, and I go to this number here and replace it to the iterator, right? If I click on this item and then perform the request based on that it was clicked on this item, it will automatically add the ID to this request for the item that was clicked on. Like, I don't even know how Wized knows how this is connected. There is no logical way for me to understand how this connection works. I just know that if I do it like this, it will work. So maybe the Wized team can do better explanation. And the method is delete, and that is basically it. So let's see. I will receive a UUID. Actually, maybe we need to change this to text, but I'm not fully sure. Let's see. Oh no, we don't get any response, so that is probably it. So let's go to request history. Did that work, what I just did? Oh yeah, that worked. Okay, perfect. So we got that item deleted. So that is already set up. Let's see if it worked. Let's reload the request. Yeah, it worked. So let's see. Let's click on buy Wized merge, and we want to delete that. Let's click on it. Here we go. And this is 092. We see this was when I click on the delete button, we lock this ID assigned to the item that it was rendered on, and we locked 029. It starts with 029. So by Wized merge that was deleted, or hopefully was deleted now from the database, should start with 092. And this comes when I go to the request section because I have this ID and it has the iterator assigned to my request. So technically, if I click on it to then perform this request, which, I have to add this request still on here, it should then delete it. So actually, let's click on here. Let's go on event, click, perform request, delete. Now, how Wized should work is if I click on this item here, and this request here for delete was triggered on click of a specific dynamically rendered list item, and the data I use in my request here uses data that that the list rendering where the list click happened on is based on, and is assigned to the same iterator that where the list in Wized is based on. If I click on 2, it will log 2 and delete 2 and send 2 to the backend to have it deleted. Now, it's not fully transparent to me how it works. You know, sometimes in Wized you have to figure it out yourself, but this is what I figured out. So let's reload and let's see if this works in practice. Let's actually reload the data here to get the list. So now let's go to the delete. Keep in mind, when we click on by Wized merge, it should be 09 something. So let's click on delete. It deleted. Let's see, we clicked on by Wized merge. It should have deleted it. If I reload and run the get all request, it has deleted it. Beautiful. So, and now if I go to request history and reload that, let's go on this one, and I go to the input. Oh, I think it's request headers. Or maybe response headers. Let's see. Oh no, it's not. But it deleted the one that I wanted to, because, you know, I pass on the parameter. The parameter is passed on in the URL and not like in a body or something like this, because it's a delete request. So this is very interesting, because if I click on a specific item in a list, Wized has it set up that, let's say I click on check Wized Discord. D12 is locked right here. This is just like to help you understand it. But then more importantly, the request is then proceeded for delete, and the data sent on is, D12. And if I go to my database, we have D12. D12 is deleted. So let's actually do some more experiments. Let's add cancel Wized again. Just like that. And let's do by MacBook. Okay, perfect. And let's go to our request, and let's make it that the response of the request is the input. So the variable that will, like the input here. So to make it easier for us to double check and to understand how Wized works, right? Because I think it's very crucial to get this. And I need to first get all. Okay, so we got all now, and let's actually go even on here, and let's even delete like the on event. I can just click on setting and click on delete, because I don't need that anymore. That was just to illustrate that we get different data as I click on different list items. So let's go to cancel Wized. That's the one in the middle. I think that's the one best to double check. Cancel Wized, or what was it? Yeah, cancel Wized. So the cancel Wized item starts with 1 CD. 1 CD. So in my delete request, when I perform the delete request, it will now also return me the ID that I inputted. So 1 CD should be visible in here when I click on cancel Wized. So let's click on cancel Wized, and it will show me the result that I inputted in 1 CD. And now if you go to the database, we have 1 CD. If I reload, 1 CD was deleted. Now, this is pure magic, I think, and it's nice that Wized does it for you. Because, again, if this request here, right, the delete request, includes any dependency, any variable that is present in the process of rendering this list, right, and you have an on event to any of those items inside this list item, right, and I click on this, and it performs a certain request. If this certain request includes, again, coming back to it, any dependency for, the data that was the list rendered from, and it includes the v iterator that was assigned to the list that was being rendered. If I click on 2, it will use the 2 in here to get the ID from, 2 in this case, which is the third item, from 2 to get the ID 6, 7, 9, to then send that to the backend. So let's do the example. Let's reload. Let's make sure, everything is up to date, and let's do it again. So the last item here is 6, 7, 9. We know this because, when I render the list in here on the list item, right here, let's actually copy this again, and let's go to JSON Prettify just to understand this. JSON Prettify. And I make it pretty. We see the second item is this ID. It starts with 679, right? And that's by MacBook 679. So when I go to my request here for delete, and I click on the second item, which should be 679, I will send the data that was sent in here using the iterator, because I clicked on the second item, and this is a dependency that the list was rendered from, or that is contained in the list that is being rendered. It will add this specific ID of the list item I clicked on. And when I reload and perform the get all request, we see that by MacBook was deleted, and that this, because of I passed on this specific ID to the API to delete it, which is pretty interesting. Now, one little critique towards the Wized documentation is it's not fully clear how this works in Wized or what the technology behind it is. I just know that it works, but I cannot explain to you how it works or how those pieces fall together, because it's not really transparent to me how their technology works. But I just know that it works, and you can count on it that it works in this example. Now, one thing that will make our life way easier is we want to add an action that when I reload the page, it automatically gets the latest request. So let's call this initial load. Initial load, I do an event-based action, and I do page starts loading, I do perform request, get all. So now when the page starts loading, I'll be getting my get all request, just like that. Here we go. So I'm rendering those items, and now when I delete an item, the item has been deleted, right? If I go back to my database, that item is gone, but it's still not reflected on the front end. So I also want to add another request called, let's do this, refresh, to then be event-based when request finishes and the delete request finishes, to then perform the request again to get all items. And now this is gone because the delete request has been successfully finished, and now there is nothing left in my database. So let's actually do 0, 1, 2, 3, 3, and so on. And let's reload. And now I have some numbers in here. Those are not the iterators. Those are numbers that I just added in the database here. But now when I delete 1 is deleted, right? And when I delete 3 is deleted. And when I delete 0 is deleted. And when I delete 2 is deleted. And this is how you delete specific items from a list that is rendered in Wized, and then reflect this change on your database. And we're passing on the ID to do so. And the nice thing about Wized, I think something that we learn, is things that happen in action get communicated to specific dependencies, as you can see here, where, we base like a specific dynamic value in here based on the iterator that is assigned to the list as well. So when I add the placeholder for the ID, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I add the iterator in there like I would do it, for example, with set text, but then for the ID. If I click on this element And then, based on this click on the element, perform the request to make the API call. Any data in this request that is based on this specific element and includes the iterator will get the data for the specific item I clicked on, because the click on event on the specific rendered list item triggered this request, which I hope I did enough effort to make it understandable for you, even though I don't fully understand it yet. But I hope that this video really helped you understand, or at least helped you figure out how to render lists and how to delete specific list items from those lists, and then how to make everything work on your backend so that you can wipe out the database just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all your support, for all your wonderful comments. They really keep me going in this office with 95 degrees. And I'm sweating, sorry. And, you know, your wonderful comments and your wonderful feedback and your wonderful emails keep me going. So thank you so much for all your encouragement, for all your support. I love doing those videos, even in 95 degrees. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that Wized soon will have better documentation, so we don't have to ask ChatGPT all the time. But thank you so much for all your support. I really appreciate it. Also, thank you so much to the wonderful Wized team for all their encouragement. Not so much for the documentation, but for the good intent behind the documentation. I'm just joking. But thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate that. And see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.